Chapter 6. A Truce. As Trnt came near the port of Trnzimino, they saw the whaling ships that had been with the Turkish armada quickly entering the port of Blnc, shouting out the bad news about the capture of the kings and the loss of the armada and all its men. When Trnt reached port, he found many of his ships there, and many of the enemies that had been captured. After Trnt had been there for 2 days, all his men had returned except Hippolytus. Earlier, when Hippolytus had not been able to find his captain, he thought Trnt must have gone towards Turkey, so he ordered his pilot to set that course. While not finding the captain, he did see a new ship from the armada. When he followed the ship, it fled and stopped at an island that was nearly unpopulated. The wind was against it, and the men abandoned ship and made land by boat. When Hippolytus drew alongside, he captured the ship that was empty of men but full of riches, and took possession of it. When the captain saw that everyone was there except Hippolytus, he sent out 3 ships to search for him, and they found him coming back with his prize. When the captain got news of it and saw that he was returning with such great honor, he was very content. This Hippolytus turned out to be a very valiant knight, generous and courageous, and he accomplished singular acts in his life because he tried to imitate his master and lord. When Lord Malvaise learned that Trnt had come back triumphant and victorious, he was very glad, and he rode out to meet him. But before going, he sent one messenger to the emperor and another to the camp, and then everyone rejoiced. On hearing the news, the emperor had all the bells in the city rung, and there were great celebrations. When Lord Malvaise found Trnt, he advised him to go to the emperor as soon as he could. There was nothing Trnt wanted more, because he wanted to see the princess. He assembled all the men who had been with him, and they set sail. When they were in sight of the city of Constantinople, the emperor told him that their captain was coming with the entire armada, and the ships were already in sight. The emperor quickly had a wooden bridge constructed that extended 30 paces out over the water, entirely covered with rich satin cloths. And then he had a cenotaph placed in the center of the marketplace, covered with brocade and silk for himself, the empress, the princess, and all the maidens. And from the cenotaph to the end of the bridge where they would disembark, he had cloth of red velvet put down so that the captain would step on silk instead of on the ground. And when it was over, whoever managed to take a piece of silk was able to keep it, and many hands were wounded with swords and knives as they tried to cut a piece of silk. As the ships came into port, the captain's ship drew alongside the wooden bridge, and he came out with the Grand Carmany on his right, the king of Upper India on his left, and all the barons in front. They were met by all the townspeople, and led in great procession to the marketplace, where the emperor and all the ladies were. When Trnt was up on the cenotaph with the emperor, he knelt and kissed his hand, and he told the Grand Carmany to kiss his hand, but the Carmany answered that he would not. Then Trnt immediately dealt him with such a hard blow to the head that his gauntlet that the Carmany was forced to put his head to the ground, and Trnt said to him, "Dog, you son of a dog, now you're going to kiss his feet and his hand whether you want to or not." "I won't do it of my own free will, or even by force," said the Grand Carmany. "And if you and I were in a different place, I'd show you what it means to come close to a king. You still don't know how far my power extends, but I swear to you by our holy prophet Muhammad and by this beard that if I ever get my freedom back, I'll make you kiss the feet of one of my blacks." And he said no more. But his companion, the other king, so that he would not be dealt the blow too, knelt on the hard ground and kissed his hand and foot. Then the emperor had them seized and placed under a stiff guard inside an iron cell. The emperor and all the ladies came down from the cenotaph, and they went to the great church of St. Sophia. Trnt took the empress by the arm and escorted her, and she said to him, "Captain, you are the most glorious man in the world. If only you had come to the kingdom of Germany in my time when my father was emperor of Rome, in those days when I was wooed by 1,000 suitors. If I had seen you out of the 1,000, I would have chosen you. But now I am old and belong to another. My hope comes along too late." The princess heard all these things, and when they got to the palace, she said to Trnt, That old mother of mine is pitying herself, and she would like to play too. She thinks that if you had come in her day, she would be worthy of your love." Then the emperor came out and asked the captain about his wounds. Trnt answered that they felt a little feverish. "And I think the sea voyage has made my fever rise." The emperor ordered the doctors to take him to his quarters. When they had treated him, they told him to stay in bed so that his arm would not be permanently injured. Trnt followed the doctor's advice, and the emperor visited him every day, and told the empress and his daughter to visit him twice a day, in the morning and in the afternoon. Widow Repose, moved more by love than mercy, served him continually. Now let us go back and see how the Turks are dealing with the Christians who stayed in the camp. After they heard the cruel battle between the captain and the Grand Turk, they often came to the city of St. George and killed or captured many Christians. They made many forays, engaging them in a cruel war, so that very few survived if they fell into their hands. How the Christians suffered when they thought about Trnt not being there, and that they would have to go out and fight without him. Not even wise Deiphobus or Lord Argamont could save their lives by placing themselves in the most dangerous positions during the battles, and they all cried out for Trnt as if he were a saint. They never felt safe, but were terrified of the Turks because the great courage they had during their victories when Trnt had been there was lost now that he was gone. And they offered a special prayer to our Lord to help Trnt, for they felt that all their hope lay with him. At this time in the palace, the doctors were coming to Trnt's room. The empress had finished her hours, and she and the princess and the other ladies went to Trnt and asked the doctors when they would allow Trnt to come to the palace. "My lady," answered the doctor, "he'll be able to walk in 3 or 4 days." When the princess was back in her chambers, a sweetness came into her heart because of her great love for Trnt, and she fell to the floor in a swoon. When the maidens saw her lying on the floor, they raised such a cry that it reached the emperor's ears, and he came running, thinking the world was about to collapse around him. He saw his daughter sprawled on the ground as though dead, and he threw himself over her, crying piteously. The mother had placed her daughter's head in her lap, and was crying and wailing so that the entire palace heard her, and her face and clothing were bathed in tears. Word was quickly sent to the doctors who were in Trnt's lodging. A gentleman came who told them, in secret, "Come quickly. The princess is in such a state that you'll be lucky to find her still alive." The doctors hurried to the princess's chamber. Trnt sensed that something had happened to the princess because of the outcry the men and women were making. He quickly got up, sick as he was, and went to the princess's chambers, where he found her conscious and lying in bed. He learned that the doctors had used all their efforts to bring her back to health. When the emperor saw that his daughter had recovered, he went to his rooms with the empress, and the doctors went with him because they saw that he was exhausted from what had happened to his daughter. Trnt went into the chamber, nearly out of his mind, and when he saw the princess lying on the bed, he said pitifully, "I have never felt greater pain than now, when I thought I might lose the greatest treasure I had in the world. I heard shouts, and as soon as I thought of your majesty, I said to myself, if something is wrong with her, she'll let me know. But I've come myself to see what your highness's illness is." The princess quickly replied, "Trnt, my lord, you alone were the cause of my illness. It was brought on by the thought of your love. Love already has more power over me than I would like. I beg you to go see the emperor so that he won't know that you came to see me before you did him." She put her head under the covers and told Trnt to put his there too. Then she told him, "Kiss my breast to bring me consolation and to give you peace." And he did so very willingly. After he had kissed her breasts, he kissed her eyes and her face. Then Trnt left very content. When he was in the emperor's chambers, the doctors saw him, and they reprimanded him soundly because he had gotten out of bed without their consent. Trnt answered, "Even if it cost me my life, I wouldn't refrain from coming to see His Majesty, the Emperor, for anything in the world. When I saw you leaving my side so quickly, I could only suppose that he was in some great difficulty." Meanwhile, the men in Trnt's camp were desperate because of his illness, and they had no hope for victory without him. The Sultan sent ambassadors to the camp to deal with Trnt. When they arrived, the captain was not there, and they were disappointed. They sent a message to the emperor, and he told them to come and see him, for they would not, for they would be allowed to come and go safely. So they went to the emperor, and he welcomed them very graciously. He honored them highly because of the king of Armenia was with them as an ambassador, and he was the brother of the Grand Karamanli. Abdallah Salomon, who was more knowledgeable than the others, was asked to speak, and he said, "My lord, we are sent to your majesty by that feared and most excellent and great lord of Mohammedan's sect, the great Sultan of Babylon, and also by the Grand Turk and the lord of the Indies, and the other kings in his camp. We come before your perfect majesty for 3 things, not counting the first, which is to know about your health, life, honor, and condition. The first is, a 3 months' truce will be given to you, on land and sea, if you would like it. The second, knowing that this virtuous captain of the Christians has captured that powerful lord, the Grand Karamanli, with his mighty sword, and the king of Upper India, who is with him. If you would like to give him to us, we will pay 3 times his weight in gold as ransom, and we will give you 1.5 times the weight of the king of Upper India. Let us come to the third item. If your excellency would like a treaty of peace, with no iniquity or ill will, but only peace and love, he will think of you as a father, and you can think of him as a son. And as a token of that peace, you would give him your daughter, Karmanisa, as his wife. Under this condition, if a son is born to them, he will have to be raised in the sect of our holy prophet Muhammad. And if the daughter is born, she will be given to the mother to live under Christian law. He will live under his law, and the princess under hers. In this way we can put an end to all our misfortunes, and as a reward for such a marriage, he will give you all the cities, towns, and castles that he has taken in your empire. In addition, he will make a lasting peace with you and your people, and he will defend you against anyone who tries to harm you." The emperor held council, and then invited all the ambassadors in. He told them that out of love and consideration for the Moorish Sultan and the Grand Turk, he would sign the 3-month peace treaty, but about the other things he would reserve his judgment.